Have you ever wondered why the more you try to hold someone close, the faster they slip through your fingers? Why the more love you give, the colder they become? And why, no matter how hard you try, it feels like you are always the one chasing, while they are always the one running? Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to understand will completely change the way you see attraction, control, and emotional power. And once you see it, you won't be able to go back to who you were before. Here is the truth most people never realize. When you deal with an avoidant person, you are not dealing with someone who does not feel. You are dealing with someone who feels too much, but has trained themselves to run from it. Their distance is not confusion. It is protection. Their silence is not peace. It is escape. And this is where most people lose themselves. You think love means giving more. You think effort means proving your worth. So, you text again. You explain more. You try harder. You show them you care in every possible way. You become more available, more understanding, more patient. You believe that if you just love them the right way, they will finally stay. But something strange happens. The more you give, the less they value it. The more you try, the less they respond. The more you chase, the further they pull away. And it hurts because it makes no sense. But psychologically, it makes perfect sense. Avoidant individuals are wired to associate closeness with loss of control. The moment someone gets too close, their mind sends a signal. Danger. Not because you are dangerous, but because intimacy feels like losing independence. It feels like being trapped. So, what do? They create distance. Not slowly, but suddenly. Not clearly, but confusingly. One day they are warm. The next day they are distant. One moment they are present. The next moment they disappear. And you are left trying to figure out what changed. Nothing changed. You just got closer. And closeness is what they fear the most. Now, here is the mistake that almost everyone makes. Instead of stepping back, they step forward. Instead of creating space, they close the gap even more. They think consistency will fix distance. They think effort will fix withdrawal. They think love will fix avoidance. But in reality, every step you take toward them pushes them one step further away. Because your chasing does something very dangerous. It feeds their sense of control. When they see that, no matter how distant they become, you are still there, waiting, trying, proving they feel safe in one thing. They don't have to change. They don't have to face their emotions. They don't have to meet you halfway because you are already doing all the work. And slowly, without realizing it, you start losing something far more important than them. You start losing yourself. You lose your peace checking your phone again and again. You lose your confidence questioning your worth. You lose your identity trying to become someone they won't run from. You shrink your needs. You silence your voice. You accept less hoping one day it will become more. But it never does. Because you cannot earn consistency from someone who is comfortable being inconsistent. And the more you try, the more you trap yourself in a cycle that drains you. This is the illusion of control. You think if you just do a little more, love a little deeper, wait a little longer, things will change. But the truth is, the more you chase control, the more control you lose. And they feel it. They feel that you are emotionally invested beyond balance. They feel that your attention is guaranteed. They feel that no matter how they behave, you will stay. And when something becomes guaranteed, it loses value. That is human psychology. People don't chase what is always available. They don't fear losing what never leaves. They don't respect what constantly proves itself without being asked. And this is where everything starts to break. Because while you are trying to hold on tighter, they are slowly letting go. Not because you are not enough, but because you are giving too much of yourself to someone who is not ready to receive it. And the hardest part is this. You begin to blame yourself. You think maybe you are too much. Maybe you are too emotional. Maybe you are too available. Maybe if you change, they will stay. But understand this clearly. You are not too much. You are just pouring into someone who cannot hold what you give. And the more you pour, the more it spills. This is why chasing never works with an avoidant mind. Because your effort does not calm their fear, it activates it. Your presence does not secure them, it pressures them. Your love does not ground them, it overwhelms them. So they run, and you chase. And the cycle continues. Until one day, you realize something has to change. Not them, you. Because the moment you understand this pattern is the moment you gain the power to break it. What happens when you finally stop? Not because you gave up, but because you woke up. What happens when your energy is no longer available on demand? When your attention is no longer easy to access? When your presence is no longer something they can take for granted? Everything shifts. The moment you pull your energy back, something unusual begins to happen. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Your mind will tell you to reach out. Your emotions will push you to check, to respond, to fix the silence. You will feel the urge to go back to what is familiar. Because chasing, even when painful, feels safer than uncertainty. But this is where your strength is tested, because real power is not loud, it is quiet. It is controlled. It is the ability to pause when everything inside you is telling you to react. And when you choose that pause, you create something rare. Space. Not distance filled with anger, not silence filled with ego, but space filled with self-respect. And this space does something powerful to the human mind. It removes certainty. Before, they knew you would be there. They knew your pattern. They understood your reactions. But now something is different. Now there is no instant reply, no emotional overexposure, no constant reassurance. And the brain does not like uncertainty. When something predictable suddenly becomes unpredictable, attention increases. Curiosity rises. Awareness sharpens, because the mind is wired to notice what changes, not what stays the same. This is where the power begins to shift. You are no longer chasing their attention. They begin to notice your absence. An absence, when done with dignity, creates a deeper impact than presence ever could. Because now, instead of you trying to prove your value, they start questioning it themselves. Instead of you explaining your feelings, they start analyzing their own. Instead of you moving toward them, they feel the gap. And that gap speaks. It says something your words never could. It says you are no longer available for emotional imbalance. It says your time has value. It says your presence is not something that can be taken lightly. This is not a strategy. This is a decision. A decision to stop giving where there is no return. A decision to stop explaining yourself to someone who avoids understanding. A decision to stand in your worth without needing validation. And something inside you begins to rebuild. Your focus returns. Your energy stabilizes. Your thoughts become clearer. You are no longer consumed by what they are doing, thinking, or feeling. You start reconnecting with your own life, your own goals, your own identity. Because for so long, your world became centered around their inconsistency. Now you take that center back. And this is where most people misunderstand the process. They think stepping back is a game. It is not a game. It is alignment. It is choosing to no longer participate in a dynamic that drains you. It is refusing to abandon yourself just to keep someone else. It is understanding that love without balance is not love. It is emotional exhaustion. And when you truly step into this mindset, something changes in the way you carry yourself. You no longer seek attention, you attract it. You no longer wait for messages, you create your own direction. You no longer feel the need to explain your silence because your silence is not punishment, it is peace. And this peace becomes your power. Because when someone who was always available suddenly becomes focused, calm, and centered, it creates a shift that cannot be ignored. They start to feel it, not through words, but through absence. Not through confrontation, but through contrast. Before you were predictable. Now you are not. Before, you were always reaching. Now you are grounded. Before, your energy was easy to access. Now, it must be earned. And this is where emotional scarcity comes into play. Human beings value what feels limited. Not because it is rare by nature, but because it is not easily given. When something is always there, it becomes invisible. But when it is pulled back, it becomes noticeable. Your attention becomes valuable again. Your presence becomes meaningful again. Not because you changed who you are, but because you stopped giving it away without purpose. And here is the most important part. You are not doing this to make them react. You are doing this to reconnect with yourself. Because when your focus is on making someone else feel something, you lose control. But when your focus is on building your own stability, you gain something far more powerful than their attention. You gain clarity. Clarity about what you deserve. Clarity about what you accept. Clarity about what you will never tolerate again. And once you have that clarity, everything changes. You stop chasing confusion. You stop entertaining inconsistency. You stop settling for half effort. Because now you understand your value is not something to be negotiated. It is something to be recognized. And if someone cannot recognize it, that is not your responsibility to fix. That is your signal to step back even further. Because real strength is not forcing connection. It is allowing distance to reveal truth. And when you stand in that truth without fear, without urgency, without desperation, you create a shift that is impossible to ignore. Not just in them, but in yourself. Why does your silence suddenly start to affect them more than all your words ever did? Why does stepping away create a reaction that chasing never could? The answer is deeper than behavior. It is psychological. It touches something they have been avoiding for a long time. When your presence was constant, they never had to question it. They never had to think about losing you. You were always there, filling the gaps, keeping the connection alive, carrying the emotional weight. But now, something unfamiliar enters their world: a lack of access. And this is where everything begins to change inside them. At first, they may not react immediately. Avoidant personalities are trained to suppress, to distract, to move away from anything that feels intense. So, they will try to ignore it. They will tell themselves it does not matter. They will focus on other things. They will act as if nothing is different. But the mind does not work that way, because even if they avoid emotions, they cannot avoid awareness. They notice the shift. They feel the difference. They recognize that something they once had easy access to is no longer within reach. And this creates a quiet tension inside them. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. This is what humbling truly means. It is not about hurting them. It is not about proving a point. It is about removing the comfort they had in taking you for granted. It is about breaking the pattern where your effort carried everything while they remained distant. And when that pattern breaks, they are left alone with something they are not used to facing: their own thoughts. Without your messages, without your energy, without your emotional support, they begin to sit with the reality they avoided for so long. They start to remember your consistency, your patience, your presence. And slowly curiosity turns into something deeper: reflection. They begin to ask questions they never asked before. Why did you stop? What changed? Are you still there? Are you moving on? Did they lose something real? And these questions create discomfort, because now the control they once felt is no longer stable. Before, they could take space whenever they wanted, knowing you would still be there. Now that certainty is gone. Now there is a risk, and risk creates emotional pressure. This is where the internal conflict begins. One side of them wants to stay distant. It wants to protect, to avoid vulnerability, to keep emotional walls intact. This is the side they are familiar with, the side that kept them safe. But another side starts to speak, a quieter side, but stronger than they expect. It reminds them of your value. It reminds them of how you made them feel. It reminds them that something meaningful might be slipping away. And this creates tension between their ego and their attachment. The ego says, stay in control. Do not reach out. Do not show interest. Do not risk rejection. But attachment says something else. It says you matter. And when these two forces collide, they cannot ignore it forever. Because your absence is no longer just space. It becomes a mirror that reflects everything they avoided. The inconsistency, the distance, the lack of effort, the imbalance they allowed to exist. And this reflection is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. They can no longer blame timing. They can no longer blame confusion. They can no longer pretend everything was fine. Because if everything was fine, you would still be there in the same way. But you are not. And that difference forces awareness. Not because you told them, but because they feel it. And feelings that come from within are always stronger than words from outside. This is why your silence carries weight. Because it is not filled with anger. It is filled with truth. You are no longer reacting. You are no longer chasing. You are no longer trying to prove your place in their life. You simply stepped back. And in doing so, you removed the illusion that they could have you without effort. Now they have to face a new reality. If they want access, they have to move. If they want connection, they have to show up. If they want you, they have to risk something. And risk is exactly what they tried to avoid. This is the moment where everything they suppressed begins to surface. Memories become clearer. Moments feel more significant. Your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. And they start to feel something they are not used to. Loss. Not complete loss, but the possibility of it. And the possibility of losing something valuable is one of the strongest emotional triggers in human psychology. It activates attention. It creates urgency. It forces action, because people rarely appreciate what they have when it is always there. But they always notice when it is gone. And now, you are no longer someone who is always there. You became someone they might lose. And that changes everything. What happens when they finally feel that shift? When the distance you created turns into something they cannot ignore anymore? When the silence becomes heavier than the connection they once avoided? They start moving. Not always in a loud way, not always with clear words. But the energy changes. The same person who once delayed responses begins to show signs of attention. The same person who acted distant starts finding small ways to come closer again. And it may seem sudden, almost confusing. But it is not random. It is triggered. Because once the fear of losing you becomes real, something deeper takes control. Human behavior is not driven only by desire. It is driven by loss. People can ignore what they have, but they react strongly to what they might lose. And now, you are no longer guaranteed. This is what pulls them back. Not your effort, not your explanations, not your patience from before. It is your shift, your growth, your calmness, your ability to stand without reaching. That is what creates attraction again. Because now you are, and that choice changes how they see you. Before you were available without limit. Now you are selective. Before your attention was easy. Now it is earned. Before they felt no urgency. Now they feel time is moving without them. And time creates pressure. Because the longer you remain in your own space, focused and grounded, the more they realize something important. You are not waiting. And when someone realizes you are not waiting, they begin to question their position in your life. They start to wonder if they still matter. They begin to think about what happens if you move on completely. This is where their actions begin to shift. They may reach out. They may test the connection. They may try to reconnect in subtle ways. Sometimes it is a simple message. Sometimes it is a sudden interest in your life again. Sometimes it is a change in tone, softer than before. But understand this clearly. Their return is not the victory. Your transformation is, because if nothing inside you has changed, the same pattern will repeat. The same cycle will restart. The same imbalance will slowly come back. And you will find yourself in the same place again. So, the real question is not why they came back. The real question is, who are you now that they are back? Are you still the person who overextends? Are you still the one who ignores your own needs? Are you still willing to accept half effort just to keep someone close? Or have you become someone different? Someone who values peace over attention? Someone who observes actions instead of believing words? Someone who understands that connection should feel stable, not confusing. Because this is where the real power lies. Not in making someone return, but in deciding what you allow when they do. Because when you have built your self-respect, you no longer fear losing them. You no longer feel the need to prove anything. You no longer chase clarity from someone who avoids giving it. You simply watch. You observe consistency. You notice effort. You feel energy. And you respond based on what is real, not what you hope for. And this changes everything. Because now you are not controlled by emotions. You are guided by awareness. And awareness protects you from falling back into old patterns. This is the difference between temporary change and real growth. Temporary change is external. It depends on how they act. Real growth is internal. It depends on who you have become. And when your growth is real, something powerful happens. You become unshakable, not cold, not distant, but stable. You can give without losing yourself. You can care without overextending. You can connect without abandoning your boundaries. And that balance is what creates true attraction. Because people are drawn to those who are centered. Those who do not seek validation, but naturally hold value. Those who are not trying to be chosen because they have already chosen themselves. And when you reach that point, something interesting happens. You stop focusing on whether they will stay. You start focusing on whether they deserve to, because now your standards are higher. Not out of ego, but out of understanding. You understand that your time is limited, your energy is valuable, your peace is important, and anyone who enters your life must align with that. And if they do not, you are no longer afraid to walk away, because you have already done it once. You already proved to yourself that you can step back, rebuild, and stand stronger. And that confidence cannot be taken from you. So, when they come back, you do not lose yourself again. You remain who you have become, calm, clear, grounded. And that is the real win, not their return, but your control over your own life. Because at the end of the day, the moment you no longer need them is the moment you finally understand your worth. And that is something no one can take away from you.